This is Walter Bosley. I'm going to read a selection from Empire of the Wheel 3, The Nameless Ones, by Walter Bosley. Chapter 30, Nimza, Lamb, and Nazis. It has been thought by many that Aleister Crowley made contact with an extraterrestrial being which he identified in a 1919 drawing as Lamb. However, Crowley himself never states this in any of his writings. As a matter of fact, Lamb appears in Crowley's 1918 Liber 71, and all that is said in association with the drawing is that Lamb is the Tibetan word for way or path. Lam or Lam. Lama represents one who follows the way or path. Crowley also offers that its numerical value is 71, the number of the book itself, a commentary on a writing of Helena Blavatsky, Grand Dame of Theosophy. The idea that Lam was an extraterrestrial being from Sirius comes from Kenneth Grant and has been perpetuated by UFO enthusiasts and conspirators alike, due to the drawing's obvious resemblance, though not exact, to classic reports of so-called alien greys. Lam also curiously resembles the image on the cover of Whitley Strieber's Communion, which is itself clearly a distortion of Strieber's own facial features. This coincidentally suggests what some think of Crowley's drawing of Lam being just another of Crowley's self-portraits. Whatever it resembles, or whoever Lam is intended to be, we must point out that Lam is not a name. Crowley acknowledges himself that Lam is the Tibetan word for way or path. Not even Lama is a name, rather, it is a title. Also, we must point out that Crowley did dabble in contact with entities. The figure Aiwass was considered by Crowley to be a discarnate intelligence separate from him. Ultimately, of Aiwass, Crowley wrote, and I quote, "I now incline to believe that Aiwass is not only the god once held holy in Sumer, and mine own guardian angel, but also a man as I am, insofar as he uses a human body to make his magical link with mankind, whom he loves, and that he is thus an ipsissimus, the head of the AA." End quote. Aiwass uses a human body to link to humankind, like Cthulhu reaching out from the sepulchral tomb in the depths of the Pacific into the minds of artists and adepts in Lovecraft's famous story. Like the numerous legion of demons possessing the man's body in the Bible, like Hari's Nimza, who need an identity, a living human, to escape the bonds of their imprisonment. Is there truly nothing in common between Aiwass and the Lam figure? Does Crowley not say much about the Lam figure because he can't? Did Lam remain nameless because Crowley did not know his name, or because Crowley was forbidden to reveal his name? What are we to think now of Crowley's presence in San Bernardino just days before the mysterious death of Cora Stanton, a.k.a. Etta Place? Does any of Crowley's involvement with deep magical attempts at contact with disembodied entities, or his obvious influence of Lovecraft, where the question of a lost mythology of the Pacific is concerned, change our earlier opinion that he had nothing to do with the San Bernardino workings suggested in Empire of the Wheel, Volume 1? It definitely alters our opinion regarding how much Crowley might have known when he passed through San Bernardino in 1915. However, there is no more evidence now to suggest Crowley had a hand in what may have happened in 1915 than there was before. There is, though, more to suggest that the circumstances made Crowley aware of what occult extremists may have believed they were doing, and that has been this book's contention all along. Crowley knew something, but would likely have disapproved and may possibly have tried to discourage it. Until more evidence of his time in San Bernardino surfaces, we will never know his role in this mystery, if he had one. No matter what the reader believes personally, the perpetrators of these murders associated with telluric current sites appear to believe they were and are serving a greater power than themselves, and all of us. Might Crowley have suspected in 1915 that the spiritualist extremists we point to in Empire of the Wheel 1 were actually making progress in contacting other beings via shenanigans on the telluric currents? We don't know. For now, Crowley must remain on our incidental list, for we can't rightfully claim him a suspect, and he may even have been an unlikely foe to the perpetrators. Law enforcement and intelligence agencies have long enlisted so-called villains, and Crowley's reputation and associations would have made it so very easy for him to move among the suspects without suspicion. If Crowley's work had been some sort of direct inspiration for a nefarious plot, the mage may very well have taken such offense that he might have relished the role of undercover agent. As it stands, Crowley's presence in San Bernardino in November 1915 is a major curiosity, especially in light of all that is discussed in this volume and Empire of the Wheel 1. What was it with the Germans? But what about those Germans who moved into the spotlight in Empire of the Wheel 2? The Edda Place revelation and the German-backed Sonora Aero Club saga of Charles Delschow revealed the likely identity of Nimza and provided a long-missing backdrop to the 20th century rumors and legends of Nazi anti-gravity technology experiments. In this we may have an association to Crowley's LOM. It is well known that Nazi scientists and archaeologists were sent around the world in search of evidence to support their mad philosophy. One of the places they ventured was into Tibet, the very place with which Crowley identified the LOM figure. There has been much speculation on what the Nazis may have found there, and one possibility is the technology of Die Glocke, or the bell. The bell is best described as two counter-rotating cylinders on a common axis. The cylinders were allegedly filled or coated with pure mercury. The axis was reportedly hollow and its core filled with a special mercury compound. This device was supposedly developed primarily as a propulsion system, but resulted in much more to the astonishment of the German scientists who worked on it. The bell may also have been the legacy of lost ancient technology, specifically of flying vimanas of ancient India, as described in the Ramayana and Mahabharata. Allegedly, these ancient flying palaces were powered by something called a mercury vortex engine, described in a 1952 book, reportedly transcribed in Sanskrit between 1918 and 1923. The Nazi version seems to have been a version of this mercury vortex technology, adapted with Tesla technology and the vortex power theories of Victor Schauberger. What is intriguing for us is that this technology appears to be curiously similar to that mysterious propulsion system which Charles Delschow shows powering the flying machines of the 1850s Sonora Aero Club. Consider the illustration in the book. In the middle is an illustration of the legendary Nazi bell. On the right is the also legendary Kecksburg UFO. On the left is a peculiarly similar propulsion-related device aboard one of the Sonora Aero Club flying arrows, reportedly dated almost a century ahead of both the bell and the Kecksburg UFO. Though each one might appear to specifically work in their own particular manner, the identical basics are there. The general shape, the encased central core axis, and the spinning rotation. The differences could be attributed to the advancement of this technology over the course of 3/4 of a century. This example is just the one that looks pretty much just like the Nazi bell. There are several other examples of this basic idea throughout Delschau's paintings of the Sonora Aero Club machines. We also include examples of the spinning drum to which an unidentified liquid fuel is being applied to produce the anti-gravity effect. According to Charles Delschow, The images illustrate the spinning rotating apparatus of the engines allegedly used by the Sonora Aero Club in the 1850s. Charles Delschow describes a mysterious fluid that was applied to the spinning drum, which resulted in an anti-gravity effect. This process is nearly identical to the operation of the Nazi bell during World War II. So what do we have? War games? We have this legend of a German device called the bell that allegedly produces an anti-gravity effect and was supposedly based upon ancient lost technology from India. The Germans of the era in which the bell was developed were known to have gone to Tibet and rumored to have acquired secrets lost to history, including those relative to forgotten India. It so happens that this Nazi bell physically resembles and mechanically duplicates a device drawn almost 100 years prior by a German expat who claims this technology-powered anti-gravity aircraft in the decade prior to the American Civil War. This German expat claims the group that built these flying machines in California in the 1850s was backed and supported by a covert German-based group called Nimsa, which we indeed have been able to translate effectively from German in Volume 2. I would like to add that proper dating has been identified for Delschau's version of the bell. His drawing was accomplished sometime between 1893 and 1923, the year he died. Still, this is an image of the bell, just like the Nazis were alleged to be developing more than 20 years before the war, specifically before World War II. So Delschau's drawing still, by decades, precedes the so-called Nazi bell. Throw in Crowley's association to Tibetan lore with Lam and his link to German spies during the period of the San Bernardino working, and you have to consider his reported attempts at contacting entities from other dimensions and how this might fit into the entire milieu of what early 20th century occultists, and especially the extremists, believed. Might Crowley have known some of what the Germans eventually learned in Tibet and elsewhere? Might Crowley have actually shared some of this in German spy circles, and they took him more seriously than he intended? If you consider all this, you must consider again just what was going on with these people in San Bernardino in 1915. Might it all have been simply to fool the enemy? Full circle. The questions that were asked in the first volume remain. The answers have led to more questions, bigger questions. The new questions have opened doors to the unexpected. How does all this relate to a woman found dead in a lake in 1915? The reader is challenged to answer, how does it not? This mystery is not yet solved, not by a long shot. Epilogue. To reiterate suggestions and conclusions of the first two Empire of the Wheel books, in the midst of World War I, with German, Indian, and British spies operating in the area in Southern California, there is evidence to suggest that a covert organization interested in local uses of resources relative to secret technology, which, of course, we are told led to the Nazi bell, sent agents to investigate curious occult activities of a group of people possibly committing murders in the service of a magical system dedicated to an ancient goddess. Riverside, the nearest city to San Bernardino, displays even more blatant evidence of dedication to the same ancient goddess and the practice of a dark magical system that continues to motivate more devoted individuals to acts of abuse and murder on men, women, and children to this very day. It may be that this activity is associated with a wider tradition of human sacrifice, committed in a manner to shock the public, aimed at perception management, in an endgame designed for our times. Finally, the clues to all of this may have been there for many years, embedded in the fiction of Howard Phillips Lovecraft. who could not resist writing about the mysterious lost old ones at the bottom of the Pacific who have no names, yet wield so much power over the minds of those who would embrace black-hearted traditions in belief that the dark promises of personal glory will come true. Or it could all be in our imagination, and none of this means any of what we've suggested. It could be that all this talk of Tibet and Mercury vortex engines and mysterious German agencies and sacrifice of humans to old ones from the stars was all just a game of perception management of a world at war. There could be no actual link between the assassins and the serial killings and terrorist attacks other than the evil that men do. The Space Shuttle Challenger disaster could actually have been nothing more than the O-ring malfunction. Butch and Sundance might have died in Bolivia in 1908 and at a place merely disappeared into obscurity. Frank Rosasco might just have given up and checked out of reality. It is either nothing or it is something. You must decide for yourself. As the first book stated, we depart with as many questions as we had in the beginning. In the quest for answers, some astonishing and unexpected facts have been revealed. As you have learned, the mystery is not contained within this empire of the wheel of Southern California. It is to be found beyond San Bernardino and Riverside, farther back than the Sonora Aero Club, and as recent as a moment ago, woven like an invisible thread through the fabric of society and civilization. These 3 Empire of the Wheel books are only an introduction to this mystery, and the reader curious enough to want to know more knows where to start pulling threads. A word to the wise. When you knock on strange and mysterious doors, be prepared for whoever or whatever opens them. I'm Walter Bosley, and that was a selection from my book, Empire of the Wheel 3, The Nameless Ones.